Israel convicted the secular Druze of what it describes as one of the worst attacks ever on its soil.
The commandos shot their hostages.
On April 22, 1979, Samir Kuntar and a group of militants snuck into the Israeli coastal town of Nahariya. They broke into the residence of an Israeli family, holding a father and his 4-year-old daughter hostage. After a firefight with Israeli security forces, Kuntar shot the father and clubbed the 4-year-old to death with the butt of a rifle.
For sure,
Kuntar became a hero to many Lebanese. As they saw it, he was fighting for his country against a hated enemy. In recent years, HEZBOLLAH has repeatedly demanded his release. There was a prisoner exchange with Israel back in 2004. HEZBOLLAH wanted Kuntar to be part of that exchange, but in the end, the Israelis wouldn't give him up.
There was an agreement to exchange Samir Kuntar only and only in exchange for new and valuable information concerning the pilot, the co-pilot Ron Arad, who went missing in Lebanon in the 80s. HEZBOLLAH failed to deliver. We never got the information or the proof we wanted, and so, of course, the deal was off.
HEZBOLLAH leader Hassan Nasrallah made it his mission to get Kuntar released through any means necessary. We haven't given up on any prisoners, he said. We will continue working on it, and we have options. We have ways to do it. Getting Kuntar out was part of what Nasrallah called his true promise, a promise he's made again and again. For example, just this last February, he said, "We're working to make this year the year to free our brothers, Samir Kuntar and his friends." On July 12th, HEZBOLLAH fighters grabbed 2 Israeli soldiers, a move that infuriated Israel and ignited the conflict. Nasrallah called the capture of the Israelis Operation True Promise, suggesting the Israelis were taken in part to force the release of Samir Kuntar. But Israel says releasing Kuntar is not on the table, despite Nasrallah's calculations.
Israel's position on the abducted soldiers is exactly what the UN Security Council resolution says. They must be released unconditionally at once.
Those now watching scenes of destruction and chaos as the fighting goes on between Israeli soldiers and Hezbollah terrorists might wonder what is going on and why. The answer to that question may be as simple as Samir Kuntar. Who is Samir Kuntar? On Sabbath day, April 22, 1979, Kuntar, along with a gang of 3 other Palestinian terrorists, infiltrated Israel and broke into the Haran family's apartment and took 2 hostages, one of them a 4-year-old girl, Einat Haran. When police arrived, the terrorists murdered her father in front of her eyes. Then Samir Kuntar smashed in the little girl's head with the butt of his rifle. Samir Kuntar was sent to prison, but that did not end the matter. In 1985, Palestinian terrorists hijacked the Italian cruise ship the Achille Lauro, taking its passengers hostage and demanding the release of Samir Kuntar and 50 other terrorists. They picked out a wheelchair-bound Jewish-American passenger named Leon Klinghoffer and threw him overboard. Among Palestinians, Samir Kuntar is a hero. The man who courageously crushed the little girl's skull is celebrated for the deed and described as a glorious warrior. Appeals to the UN are regularly made on his behalf. Unlike his victim, Samir Kuntar is alive. He lives comfortably in his jail cell, writes back and forth to his admirers back home, and even got married and receives conjugal visits. Samir Kuntar received honorary Palestinian citizenship. An official Palestinian Authority newspaper described him as a beacon of light. Another called him an authentic role model for all Palestinians. Palestinian TV proclaimed, "He is your son, but he is also our son, the son of Palestine. We ask of Allah that there be 100 more Samir Kuntars, 1,000 more Samir Kuntars, 1,000,000 more Samir Kuntars." In 2004, Hezbollah leader Sheikh Nasrallah announced that he was determined to obtain the release of Samir Kuntar by any means necessary, including kidnapping Israeli soldiers. Now in 2006, that promise was fulfilled when Hezbollah terrorists, despite a treaty, invaded Israel, killed Israeli soldiers, and took 2 more soldiers as hostages. At a press conference, Sheikh Nasrallah again demanded the release of Samir Kuntar, among other terrorists, in exchange for the hostages. Israel refused and instead went to war, striking Hezbollah targets across Lebanon, blockading Lebanese ports, and destroying the airport to prevent the hostages from being taken out of the country, even as Hezbollah began shelling Israeli cities. The answer to why we fight rests in Samir Kuntar, not only because he has become a pretext for Palestinian and Iranian-backed Shiite terrorism, but because Kuntar represents the values of Israel's enemies, the same values that lead them to celebrate suicide bombers who blew up buses, college cafeterias, and pizzerias as glorious heroes. We fight because there can be no peace with such enemies, because they will not permit there to be peace. Israel withdrew from Lebanon, and so Hezbollah invaded Israel. Israel withdrew from Gaza, and Palestinian terrorists invaded Israel from Gaza. The conflict is not over a few miles of land, but over the very existence of Israel itself. It is not possible to live in peace with the sort of people who invade your country, smash in a 4-year-old girl's head, and the sort of people who would celebrate them as heroes. They can be either fought or surrendered to, but there is no third option. Israel may have superior firepower on its side, but its enemies are backed by nations like Iran and Saudi Arabia, larger, wealthier, and more powerful, and they will continue sending terrorists like Samir